What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another Battlefront 2 video. And today we're going to be covering Palpatine. Now, before I start, like usual, just a little brief intro to Palpatine. He is a little quirky to play as, in the sense that if you're doing a lot of close quarters things, it could be beneficial, but it could also come back to bite you in the butt. For example, Palpatine's lightning attack has a very weird range and radius issue. When you get really close to your target, if you're zapping lightning in their direction, you can sometimes find that you're not actually damaging or even affecting them at all, even though you might be aiming exactly at them. That's if you're too close. Now, if you are within that range that you're too close and not damaging them, typically you can click the right trigger. It's R3 on PlayStation and, oh god, I don't know what it is on Xbox, but it's the right stick. You click that down, and it should melee. And that melee will get him real close, and it'll be like his hands are on the opponent, electrocuting them. That is the only fix I've seen so far that works. But you'll see a lot of what I do and the way I play is I'll jump up in the air. That way I'm creating a little bit of distance and then shocking my opponents that way. I spend most of my time as Palpatine in the air, actually. You'll see it very frequently in the clips I'm about to show you here. But anyway, let's get into it. Sorry for the long intro. Now, getting into it, Palpatine doesn't have a ton of abilities that I am in love with. One of his abilities is, quite honestly, just his lightning attack, and that's not even an ability, but I like the star cards that improve that lightning attack. For example, Lightning Reach, which will increase the distance at which Emperor Palpatine's lightning can affect an opponent. Now, I pretty much don't take this off regardless of game mode. HVV, Hero Showdown, Supremacy, Galactic Assault, any and when I say this, I mean any single game mode I use this card on. So to me, this is like a must-have. The further his lightning will reach, the better. And like I mentioned before, his lightning does have that weird quirky thing where when you're too close, it's not effective. So you want to be able to keep as much distance as possible while still affecting your opponents. This next card is a must-have in the trooper-based game mode, Surge of Lightning, which allows his left ability, which is Lightning Bounce, to actually go and hit more targets. Now, I've done some testing, but I can't quite determine the exact number of targets that his Chain Lightning already hits. My conclusions were anywhere from 4 to 6, so increase that by 4, it's either increasing it to 8 or to 10. Regardless, though, that card kind of becomes useless in Heroes vs. Villains or even Hero Showdown because there's only 2 enemies or 4 enemies, and seeing as the card already does 4 to 6, you don't need that extra 4 or however many you've got it upgraded to at that point. So that one is just for trooper-based game modes, but seeing as it takes down most troopers to about half health, then your lightning attack will finish off that trooper very quickly. So you'll want to do as much damage to those troopers as possible, getting them down to half health. Let's say you've got 10 troops in front of you. You get 10 troops down to half health, then you can get your lightning attack and just spray downfield, and odds are you're going to get a bunch of health back if you are in need of health, or at the very least, you don't need health, you're going to get a bunch of kills. Either way, it's a card worth having. Alright, this next one I feel a little dumb talking about, because for the longest time, I just thought that it increased your damage if you used both hands for a lightning attack. But that's not the case. I finally read the card and realized that I've been wrong, just straight up wrong. Basically, it does extra damage, 30 extra damage, which is a solid bit, if you're using both hands for your lightning attack on enemies who have been electrocuted. And Electrocute is Palpatine's right ability, so on PlayStation R1, on Xbox RB, I think. And that ability is such a short range that it's almost not worth it. I used to have this card equipped all the time, and honestly, it's still a good card if you're using it for Hero Showdown or even Heroes vs. Villains, but it's not my first pick. I will usually go with another card. As I've said in previous videos, everyone has a different playstyle, and everyone likes to use different things. You may be better with this card than I am, just because I don't use Electrocute all that much. This next card, in Full Control, basically just gives you a increased amount of stamina as Palpatine when using your lightning attack, and I think that is pretty much good for just about any game mode. I always believe that stamina is going to be your best friend in this game, and the more you have, the better you'll be, especially when your main use of attacking is draining of stamina. I mean, his stamina runs out very, very fast, and all the clips that you'll be watching, you'll think, I guess the stamina does drain pretty quick, but I actually have the star card on in all these clips, so if you're thinking it's draining fast right now, imagine without that star card, it drains a whole lot quicker. So that extra 16% doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, it's definitely worth the star card to be put on. This next star card is one that I would also consider swapping in and out, but only in trooper-based game modes, because your chain lightning needs to be hitting a lot of people for this card to be doing a good job. And I'll let y'all read it. If you need, you can pause the video. But this one, you want to hit as many targets as possible so you can get that cooldown going and then get your abilities refreshed a little bit quicker. Now, I personally, I don't have too much of a problem with how fast Palpatine's abilities refresh as is. I usually wait and save my chain lightning for when there's a big mob of people, kind of like you just saw right there, when there's just a ton of enemies right there and it can hit a bunch of them in a short little area. Then all you have to do is finish them off with your two-handed lightning, and they usually die pretty quick, which is a good way to regain some of your lost health or even just to get a bunch of kills. And the last star card I'm going to talk about is Forked Lightning, and that's just because I haven't really talked about a star card that helps specifically in Heroes vs. Villains, and that would be this star card. I am a firm believer of Electrocute being the ability that gets most Palpatine players killed. The reason being is, to use Electrocute, you have to stand in still, like you have to just pick a spot, lock your feet, stand perfectly still for a ton of enemies to shoot you, and then take a full, I think it's like 2 seconds, to spray out some lightning that is going to freeze a small area in front of you. Now, in trooper-based game modes, this is a problem, because you're likely going to miss at least 1 or 2 players because the radius isn't very big. I mean, you'll see it in these clips right here. Now, these clips are the base radius. I don't have the increased range in these clips right here. So if you increase that range by 30%, it is going to be a bit longer, but it won't be any wider. It'll just be longer. So take that little cone and just extend it a little bit further. And 30% isn't a little bit. That's a solid bit. So it's a good star card. It's just, I don't like using that ability in trooper-based game modes because you have to stand still, and while you're standing still, rather than jumping in the air and moving around a lot, you are a very easy target. If someone, let's say there's a heavy that's got their little death machine or turret, whatever it is, that they can walk around and just spray tons of bullets. If they get a couple solid headshots off on you, or even if they just start aiming in your general direction and unloading into you, you're not moving and you're taking a ton of damage. So let's just assume you've got 600 of your health rather than 700, because most of the time you're not going to run around with a full 700 head of health. It's not going to take him long to completely drain your health, and he might not get all of it right then and there, but he is going to get enough of it to where once you start moving again, it's not going to take a whole lot of damage to completely finish you off. So to me, that's just a score streak ender, is when you're using that Electrocute ability, it ends score streaks so fast. However, if you were to use his Electrocute ability in, let's say, Heroes vs. Villains or Showdown, you're freezing the few players that are on that team. I mean, there's only a total of 4 players in Heroes vs. Villains that you're fighting against, and in Hero Showdown, there's only 2. So the likelihood of you getting lit up or damaged heavily while you're doing your Electrocute is a lot smaller because there's not as many targets to shoot at you. Another thing you'll want to consider, I know I talked about it earlier, but you saw right there I just did the little melee thing where he puts his hands on someone and then electrocutes that way. If you're in a tight corridor, kind of like I'm in pretty much this entire clip, you're going to want to be finger on the trigger ready to click that down on the off chance you get really close to someone. Now, you're going to want to still keep your distance as much as possible, as I'm doing here. I'm trying to keep distance and make sure my lightning is going to hit him. But you also want to save that chain lightning because it is going to be your savior in those tight corridors. You also want to keep in mind of where your teammates are surrounding you, because Palpatine is not defensive at all. He is 100% an aggressive player. He gets in, does a bunch of damage, gets out. He's pretty much like Grievous in that matter, except Grievous does have some defense moves. Palpatine's biggest defense is Electrocute. And if you're using Electrocute as a defensive mechanism, you're going to die really fast as Palpatine. It's not me being mean or anything. You're really just not going to survive very long while playing as him. One thing you could use semi-defensively is Dark Aurora? I can never say that word. Regardless, it's his middle ability. L1 and R1 are right bumper and left bumper on Xbox. And that just creates the little storm cloud that you see right here. And while it's not really defensive, it does constant damage. So at the very least, it kind of dazes and disorientates your opponent because, I mean, it takes up a large area. It doesn't look too bad when you're playing as Palpatine, but when you're getting hit with it from the other side, it's not as bad as like a flash grenade, but it is enough to where you at least need to kind of step back and see exactly where you are and what you're shooting at. But other than that, I don't really have any more tips as Palpatine. Just keep your distance, remain mobile, try and stay away from Electrocute unless you're in Heroes game modes. And that's really about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If I left anything out or if you have any questions for me that revolve around Palpatine, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.